And thanks, everyone. It's good to see most of you again. I think there are a few faces I haven't seen before. Very informal. Love to take questions as we go. If we start running out of time, I'll speed things along, but I will be glad to stick around afterwards. I am the developer technology specialist, whatever that means, assigned to help the church. All right, so that's all things Microsoft and dev focused. Obviously, I've been doing this role for about 4 years, and I've been at the church probably, on average, twice a year, maybe, plus or minus. So I've probably seen a lot of you before. I do various types of topics, just trying to help out. This group is my primary audience. That said, these days, as per my last session, being Microsoft and talking to software is not always about talking .NET. So talking to your group is my primary, but I'm happy to talk to Java devs and Node devs and all sorts of other stuff too. Kind of scary coming from a Microsoft person. But anyway, last time I was here, I looked and it was last September, right? And at that point, we talked about Microsoft and open source. Since then, we've had several announcements and events. We were flowing new release information out continuously. Probably a lot of you are aware of the Connected event we had in November, all available on Channel 9 with the streaming information about all these different sessions. The Visual Studio launch, which happened last month, 6 weeks ago. And recently, we pushed out Windows 10 Creators Update, which of course affects .NET as well. So even though it's only 6 months, a lot of things have changed. That said, I'm not here to talk about a lot of things. I'm here to talk about the things that, to me, seem most interesting. There are definitely some things that are missed that I'm not going to be able to talk about, just lack of time. But hopefully the stuff we're going to talk about is stuff that's interesting and fun. I have about 20 slides total. We've already been through 3 of them. So most of this is going to be demo and discussion. Hopefully that doesn't disappoint anybody. I know that after lunch is a good time to take a nap. I'll try to keep that from happening. Starting with .NET, because that's the primary focus, but also the tooling that goes around .NET, VS and TFS and VSTS and MOUSE and whatever else, right? Pick an acronym. And finally, Azure stuff, because I can't be at Microsoft if I don't say something about Azure. This is stuff that's not necessarily completely new, but I think it's really pretty cool and really pretty easy, especially for the .NET crowd, so I'll show you a few things in Azure that you might be able to make use of probably pretty quickly. So hopefully that's not way off. So first slide, what's new in .NET? Here's a really small bullet summary that says, the framework has changed and there's been little things that have been added. That's about all it says. If you read through the list, you can find something that might say, well, that's really kind of cool, or you might say stuff, who cares? And a lot of it's kind of the who cares.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh,
sorry, I'm recording the meeting.
Okay, so any questions will be recorded. But that's what a framework is. So if we think about how Microsoft is changing the view of .NET, we still have the everything is built-in model, but we also have the highly modular model, where everything's coming through NuGet. And doing that, we can have a lot of interesting things evolve around the platform without updating the framework. So the things we're looking at here are really framework things. Okay, Tuple is really cool. A lot of stuff going back to even Windows Forms that are supporting high DPI monitors. A lot of emphasis on high DPI support in .NET 4.7, which again is a framework thing. Okay, great. There are a couple things that are a little more interesting. Long path support, which was kind of nice in .NET 4.6.2, which has happened since. We've had 2 .NET releases since the last time I was here. But I'm not going to dwell on any of these things. I'll spend a few more seconds on C#. How many people are primarily VB? I thought I was going to say C#. I saw some hands creep up and then go back down. But C#, good. I expected so. That's very common. And if I thought there were a lot of VB people, I probably would put more in here on VB. There's nothing in here on VB except maybe a word or two. F# would be good. I'm not a functional programmer, so I'm not completely useless, but mostly. So I have as much in here on F# as I do on VB. There were a lot of evolutions in C#. C#, the Roslyn compilers, they're all open source right now. This is by committee, but run by Microsoft. And since C#6 came out, here are the updates in C#7. We're actually going to go through and take a look at some of these things, so you can take a look at the syntax. This is syntax that can hopefully make your code a little more efficient, a little bit easier to read, a little shorter, a little more concise. If we didn't want concise, we'd use VB. And references down there. So without going into all these, I'm actually going to hop in and take a look at demos, because I know people much prefer looking at code than looking at slides. Otherwise, you wouldn't be developers. I'm going to do my demos in, I don't know why I'm prompted to do this. I think your network's asking to log in Visual Studio 2017. So this is the official release. Matter of fact, this might be a pre-release of things coming forward. I don't recall what I have in this box, but it's going to be pretty close to what you'd be using today. And I'll bring up the ever popular console Hello World app with the real purpose of just showing syntax. Because when I talk to C#, it's about the syntax changes that make the language more useful.
Dave, I'll be monitoring the chat in case any of the remote people ask any questions. I will interrupt you.
Please, absolutely. And for those of you who are not typing questions in the chat window, feel free to interrupt me as well.
Might fix the speed issue.
You know, a lot of things are a lot faster. I think this is because I'm on a pre-release version of Windows. I'll blame that, I'm not sure. You do notice across the top, though, where we're waiting for it to come up, this massive Hello World console application. It is monitoring a lot of stuff now, because a lot of things that have happened to slow Visual Studio down in the past have been add-ins. And so we're at least monitoring the add-ins. So if there is something, instead of just saying Visual Studio sucks, we can say, oh, wait, this add-in is slowing my IDE down. In this case, if I look at the IDEs, what the add-ins are, they're all Microsoft add-ins, so I'm not going to show that. It would be embarrassing. So,
Songsmith.
so I'm going to go ahead and I will do this. And you can read the text, or shall I try to make it larger? A little bit larger. I'm going to go through this in terms of single-stepping the code, just so you can see what the code is as we go. This is, like I said, it really is basically a Hello World application. This is a .NET Core application that doesn't do anything but Hello World, but it also shows the syntax. So I'm going to demo out variables. I'm going to demo patterns. We'll look at tuples, deconstructors, and local functions. Some improvements to literals, and finally we'll look at what is changed between C# 6 and 7 in expression bodied members. Hope that makes perfect sense to people. It's probably stuck. If you don't, the words don't make sense, you're probably using it but don't know what it is called. I'm going to check real quick and make sure we're still online because it's flashing at me. And we're still recording, good. Okay, set run. This is embarrassing. All right, we get a console window. We're making progress.
I will mention also, make sure you keep your name on the roll and check that you're here today. At the end of the presentation, we'll do a drawing, and we'll be giving away a prize or two out of the prize bag. And so the name will be chosen off of the roll, so please make sure you sign in.
And since Jim wasn't at the speaker or the microphone to say that, I'll say after the recording, there will be a drawing. Make sure you're signed in. That means if you're remote, you're missing it. All right, so stepping into the first part of the demo, good old F11 key. Out variables. This is just basically, and we see several times this occurs in the modern things, the ability to actually declare your variables as a side effect of something else. So historically, we declare our variables and we'd use the out variables as part of whatever we're calling. But we have in C# 7 the ability to do it right in line. So very small thing, but might make your code a little cleaner. And I assume that's completely obvious. It makes perfect sense what I just said. A little syntax handy. Next up, we'll look at patterns. So we've used the word is to do checks before, but this is kind of, again, declaring a variable as part of the check process. So I passed in a variable O, which is actually an integer. It's cast as an object, so I don't know what it is coming into it. If I look at this, I can actually say, is O an integer? And if is, as a side effect, declare I equal to O. So do the casting for you automatically. And a little extra in here as well, saying, oh, if it's a string, then do some other stuff. And again, the end goal is, if I have something that's an integer in some way, shape, or form, I enter this block. So in this case, there's nothing in there to do, but I is now set. It's set to the same value, but it's cast as an integer. So those are patterns, and they can be a little more complex too. If you're doing something like a switch statement, I'm passing in an object that's a shape, and based on what type of shape it is, I'm creating a variable and casting it as in line. Okay, hopefully a little bit interesting. In my case, it is a circle, so I don't have to go through the rest of these things. Tuples was actually a very popular item. The ability to have multiple values passed back and forth as a single item. So for example here, and I'm doing a couple things here. I'm going to be doing an inline function at the same time. But here I'm creating a variable names and passing it, some function. Let's actually step into that function, because that function is an internal function. It's inline within the method, so it's local to that method only. Look up name, so it's actually inside the same braces. But right there, the return value is a tuple. So I'm actually saying here's 3 variables that are being passed as part of this, and those will be called, in my declaration, names. So step through, and I'll return it, no big deal. But back up here, now the variable names is actually a tuple with those 3 values in there. And that was all done directly in line. So that actually starts becoming useful, the ability to dynamically declare these structures. You also have a few other things you can do in there. So, for example, in this case, instead of just creating a variable that is a tuple, I can deconstruct the contents of that. So in this case, I'm saying pull out a variable named fname and a variable named lname and assign it to those areas in the tuple. And so the syntax looks slightly different down here. Instead of returning names.first, I'm returning fname. I also have the dash in here, or the underscore rather. It's basically saying, I don't care about that return value, so just don't assign it to anything. So I'm not declaring a variable dynamically. I'm not capturing that variable. So pretty simple. Those are tuples, deconstruction, and local functions. Literals, a couple small things in here. If you're doing really big numbers, sometimes it's nice to have a separator. It'd be nice to use a comma. Oh, question.
So we have an online question that says, is there a 4.7 runtime for Windows 7 and 8.1?
4.7 runtime for not yet. Right today, .NET 4.7 was released just recently as part of the Windows 10 update. That's the most list today. It's supposed to be within a few weeks. We're supposed to get the downloads before 7 across the board.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. So back to literals. If you have a lot of digits in there, it's nice to have a separator. We usually use commas. Folks in Europe use periods. C# uses underscores. But at least you can see it, right? You can say, I can count the number of zeros. I know that's a million. A little bit easier than all run together. We also have a bit type in there, or a binary type in there, 0b instead of 0x for hex. The same type of stuff. Now, just to see who's geeking out really fast, what is 1111000000001101? Well, if you were to look at that as hex. B? Did I miss it?
Should be B, isn't that 11? No, that's not 11. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
In which case I missed. I was trying for D.
food. You're trying for food.
Yep, so there we go. 1 million Cheerios is still a lot of food. So literal is a very small thing. And the last one is expression by members, which is actually a fairly common one. This is one that you might be using today, but not know what it is, or not use the name. So it came out in C#6, and we just expanded it in C#7. If we look at how we would have done things in C#5, there's a nice little function. It happens to be a local function, and I'm just doubling a number, not a big deal. But from a syntax perspective, it's simple enough. I can put it directly in line as that. Okay, so the exact same thing, except it's just slightly cleaner syntax. Easy to do, please.
Will it support delegates?
Will it support delegates?
Can you push a expression or anonymous method through there?
You should be able to. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't work. I've never tried to do it personally. Now, that's all C#5 and 6. What we really add in C#7 is the ability to do that in the class itself. So to do this, the constructor here, that's a new syntax that's available in 7. What you saw elsewhere in 6, and now it's available as part of the constructor of the finalizers. And it's also available in the accessors. So, I missed my demo, but accessors down there. Again, maybe it makes things a little cleaner in simple cases. In a lot of cases, accessors are simple cases. All right?
How is this different than C#6?
C#6 did not, so it's the exact same syntax, but it did not work for accessors, so the get and set methods. And it did not work for constructors or finalizers. So that's what we've done. We've made it so it's now available more universally across the entire platform. Small things. And there are a few other things that have come out in C#7, but those are the ones I thought were most interesting, so those are the ones I shared with you. Hopefully, you go back and write a little slightly different code tomorrow. At least those of you who are having the opportunity to use C#7. So now we have a couple slides that look just like this, with a lot of text that you could care less about. That's not true. There are probably some things in here you really could care about. Visual Studio 2017 launched just over a month ago. My guess is some of you, probably many of you, have been playing with it before that because it's been available for preview for a long time. So the stuff I say, here's all the new stuff. Some of this stuff's been known for a while. But if you look at what was available in Visual Studio 2015 Update 3 and what's available in Visual Studio 2017, here's a concise list of some of the things out there. Release notes have a lot more stuff out there. Some of these things are very small. Some of them won't matter at all unless it matters to you. Like standalone Team Explorer, something that went away, not came back. So we have the ability to actually to talk to TFS without having to have a full Visual Studio install. Since you're a .NET crowd, I bet you have Visual Studio installed. Latest stuff for Xamarin, new installer. Here's one that's kind of interesting. If you look at Visual Studio Team Services, we roll out new releases and new features every 3 weeks. And some of those we roll out in a preview fashion. So you get new capabilities all the time. In TFS, you get those same features, or most of them, rolled up on every 3 to 4 months. And I know David over there does a very good job keeping you pretty close to up to date. So you get those features in batches. Visual Studio is stuck in the update model, where the next version comes out in the update. Now, with NuGet and all these other things, in the V6s, we can get partial updates as they flow through. But we actually now have a Visual Studio 2017 preview, an insiders group, if you will. So if you want, you can have Visual Studio 2017 preview of what's coming soon installed side by side with Visual Studio 2017 production and Visual Studio 2015 and whatever else, depending on how much hard disk space you have, right? But I will say I've been on the preview releases in some of my systems, and they come out with new things fairly frequently. A lot of them are fairly innocuous, but it's interesting that we're now taking this continuous delivery not only to our server-side products, but to our client-side products. So, as a developer, you want to geek out a little sooner, there you go. Obviously, a lot of changes in terms of the latest language supports. For those of you who are not using .NET, I know everyone in this room is using .NET, but maybe you're using some other stuff as well. We've expanded the support there. Things like the autocomplete and the color coding. A lot of these things don't have a real Visual Studio sense. You're doing PHP in Visual Studio. We can get a great editor experience, but it's not really a compiled language or things like that, right? Lots of things from Git and navigation. .NET Core we talked about last time I was out here 6 months ago. I know you guys will be doing more of those things on .NET Core. At that point, we did not have a formal release of the tools. We had formal releases of .NET Core. You could run it in production, but the tools were all in preview mode. Now the tools are GA. They're generally available and fully supported. One that I think is kind of interesting, I don't know if any of you are doing SQL Server database stuff. We have a few models for how you can manage databases. Historically, we've always had SQL Server data tools going back in time to have a database captured as a project. This is actually a third party that we've worked with to release a series of tools that make SQL Server development in Visual Studio a little easier. We have a SQL query tool. We have a prompt tool that both allow better integration or interaction with SQL Server. The one that I think is really cool is called ReadyRoll. Anybody use ReadyRoll or know what it is? Okay. Well, real quick, if you're using SSDT, SQL Server data tools, you capture the intent of your project. And what's going to do is every time you do a deploy, it's going to say, this is what my database should look like. I will at runtime compare it to what it does look like and dynamically generate the change scripts or dynamically generate the changes. So when I do a deploy, a publish, it looks at the source code and effectively pushes that out. That can be a very clean and nice model. There are some places where it breaks down. ReadyRoll takes a different approach, and that's as you update your database over time, it will capture scripts in your project for each of those incremental upgrades. So go from version 1 to version 2, here's the script you run. To go from 2 to 3, here's the script you run. 3 to 4, here's the script you run. That means as a developer, you have a lot more control of your SQL changes because you have the scripts that you can manipulate as you wish, right? So, alternate approach, it's included with Visual Studio Enterprise today. It's 2017. Analytics tools, live architecture validation. One that I think might be kind of interesting to you, I'll demo, is live unit testing. I know across the board we're all over the place in terms of how much unit testing we really do. There's nice tools to help you get started in unit testing. This is one that says, if you're doing unit testing, let me give you the feedback immediately. So it's a feature I like. If you're not doing .NET, or even if you are, we have the open folder, which allows you to use the Visual Studio Editor, but actually on the file structure, kind of like Visual Studio Code does. So if you're doing non.NET stuff, you don't need a CS proj file, you don't need an SLN file. This allows you to interact with the file system directly. Can be a good thing. I bring it up to you as .NET developers because I've accidentally gotten into this mode several times and wondered why F5 didn't work the way I expected it to. Because I wasn't in a project, I was in a series of files, which you can still configure, but recognize that as you go into this. Lightweight solution load, which we did not see happen today because it took forever to load console1.app. C++ stuff, I hope there's no one here fighting with that. Editor config is actually kind of a cool one. Anybody familiar with editor config? So this is actually a open tool set that is not just tied to Visual Studio. That allows you to actually do color coding and warnings and stuff based on your language syntaxes in the editor. So the editor will respond to whatever that configuration is. That means I can check in my team standards for style and things like that as part of my project. And if I set it one way, Visual Studio will honor it. If I say, you will see a warning if you do this type of a practice, that will show up as a warning in Visual Studio. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Some .NET Core stuff, a new exception helper that's kind of nice. I don't plan to generate an exception, so I won't show it to you, but you'll see it when you run. Various other interesting things. Let's see. Yeah, that's good enough for now. On the TFS side, VSTS, same type of thing. A lot of things have changed. This is based on the change log for team services since last September. Okay? And there's a lot of cases where you'll have things like Git enhancements. That's pretty ambiguous. Why? Because there were actually probably 10 different releases in that time where we had this little thing released and that little thing released. So there's a lot of changes in there. I just bucket together and say, if you're using Git, a lot of things have changed in the past 6 months to make life better. There are some that are a little more interesting. I put the updated change set, shelf set pages, which allows you to inspect your Team Foundation version control from the web browser in a slightly better way than we used in the past. I put that out there because we get very few investments in Team Foundation version control these days, so if I see one, I pull it in there. Various package management enhancements. Oh, question?
We've got an online question that says, is it true that there is now support for native install projects instead of having to use install shield?
So could we go back to the old setup and deploy projects is what the question was, I think.
I guess so.
I don't know the current state of that. I think that was supposed to have happened in 2015, but I didn't track it.
I don't know either.
I don't know if anybody in the room knows if set and deploy projects came back in 2015 like I assert. No one's willing to raise their hand. So I think they're back. I have not checked in 2017, but non-answer. Sorry.
So it should be there, is what you're thinking.
There was a time I heard it was coming back, and that was actually before 2017.
Okay.
So let's see. A lot of release management changes. You see something like backlog level customization. I'll leave that one in there specifically because this is a difference between what you have in TFS and what we have in VSTS. There's some capabilities in your on-premise TFS that are not in VSTS. And this is a stopgap, or not stopgap. This is a close the gap where we're getting more features in VSTS to make it, albeit different, as functional as TFS. There are obviously some things that are better in VSTS as well, but they're 95% the same code base. Mobile work item forms, probably not going to matter to you too much, but the idea here is if you receive a notification on your phone, in an email perhaps, and you click on it, it'll actually bring up the phone in a form that's usable. Right now, if you try to use VSTS or TFS in the web browser on your phone, it's pretty painful. So we're actually making it more mobile enabled. Let's see, other things that are interesting, tons of build changes, some nice widgets, personalized navigation. This is one that might be controversial. I'll say this is the way we're going. And that's that we're changing a lot of the navigation in the web browser for TFS, or VSTS, but eventually for TFS. I might show that because if you're using TFS today, you might say, wow, that looks different. I'll try to talk to you about why it's supposed to be better. You can tell me if you don't think so. Team rooms. Is anybody using team rooms?
Apparently nobody is.
Oh, so you don't care about the fact that it's going away. Good. Notifications are being changed. Firefox feedback and testing plugin. Question?
Sorry, back to the team room. When will TFS be available with Microsoft Teams? I know they're working on it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I heard some of the barriers for getting there. I don't have that piece of information.
Hopefully before 2018.
It'd be nice.
When is it deprecated?
It'd be nice, yeah. Yeah, you might have a race condition there. Test and impact analysis is something that historically was very popular. It went away as we moved to the new build release systems. The idea is it can actually figure out what tests were impacted by code changes. This was really popular back in the 2010 days for manual testing. This right here is not that. This is really if you have a lot of tests you're running as part of your build pipeline and the tests take time, you can actually say don't run the tests if they didn't touch the code that was being tested by those tests. So you can shorten your test time in automated cycles. Various other things. As David's aware, we do have an import service, and as Howard says, we're not using it. There are various other things that you can do for imports, but they may or may not work for any better. So work with your team on that. And a lot of things in preview. I don't think I've ever had the DevOps, Microsoft DevOps training discussion with you guys, but one of the things we use a lot is feature flags, feature toggles, allow us to roll out things into production without letting anybody see them. The code is inactive. And that also gives us the ability to create these opt-in experiences where you can throw that switch in your account. So I'll show that probably, stuff you won't see as much in TFS, but will be coming to TFS as well, where you can say, I want to try the new stuff, and if I like it, don't like it, I turn it off until sooner or later Microsoft says you don't have a choice. But hopefully by then we've gotten the feedback to make it what you do want. So with that, in a sec, too many alt tabs, there. So it said edit config first. I'm not going to do edit config first. I'm going to do the folders just real quick. File. Oh, isn't that nice? Visual Studio is busy. I think I probably should have quit Visual Studio. I'll blame preview releases. And I'll launch another copy. See if I can slow the system down a little more. Yeah. I locked my Visual Studio. I think this probably is one of the boxes that has the preview release on it. Makes everyone want to opt into preview, right?
Fast track.
That's right.
So you can get the latest
Latest stuff, and it'll break faster.
That's why they give you two computers.
That's right. All right. So I'm not going to. Yes, you'll report the delay. I expect that. That's very good. Thank you. But my other one's not coming up either, so. In doubt, reboot. Well,
Just be patient.
I don't want to be patient. I'm an impatient person.
You just have a lot.
Apparently so.
Whenever you're recording it, it does take time.
That's true. That's true. I was thinking an hour ago, this seemed like it went so much faster. And that explains it. You're right. There we go. I have an alternate copy. So real quick, file. Oh, this one's not responding to. Okay.
No, it is.
Okay. File. We say it is. so, open folder. Jim, when you asked me, is it okay if I record? What you're saying is, do you mind delays?
I didn't realize.
We had this last time too, I'd forgotten. So,
I think we were on a meeting place last time, and now we're on Skype. So you can't really blame it because it's still a Microsoft product. So.
oh, I can blame
You can
Microsoft
still-
products.
It's the wrong Microsoft product you got to use.
That's right. So it's taking a second to open up. This is the same solution I had before, and my point is it looks the same, except it's not exactly the same. If you're doing node development or something else that's very file system centric view, Visual Studio becomes a better solution for this because now you don't have to worry about your solution files or your project files and other stuff that don't make sense unless you're in .NET. Cue the
So you don't have to have a solution file for your nodes.
exactly. So that's the point. So this is .NET still. And I could configure this to run without a solution file, although why would I do that? At that point, I'm fighting the system. But for Node, absolutely, why do you need a project file? So this is just directory structure. It still gives me the IntelliSense and a lot of the other stuff that you'd expect to have. Not very quickly. This one ready to go away yet? I think it's my problem child.
Maybe we turn off recording to see if that will speed anything up. Recording of everything delays. Not a good recording anyway.
Yeah, we can make the recording when Tony posts this on integration point. He can cut out all the delays.
That's
It'll look really fast.
In other words, no one's going to come and watch it in person anymore.
That's right. I should mention the URL. Howard said it was integration point.lssearch.org. It's actually integration dash point.lssearch.org, or you can just do ip.ldssearch.org.
Just IP slash.
So IP slash is possible for certain browsers.
Otherwise, you just search for IP.
Do a search for IP.
Well, if you're in Google Chrome, you put IP, you just do a search for it.
Nice.
So yeah, that is slash.
Also, all these .NET engineering forums have been recorded, and they are available on integration point. So if you missed one, you want to go back and see what the topics were over the last year or so. We have all those posted.
So I'm thinking I'm going to stop playing with Visual Studio, and I'll kill this demo. So what you didn't see, the new installer, I can probably get come up really quickly. It is a very different experience. It's actually very nice that it's modularized and gives you a nice little pane saying, here's all the stuff you have. You can just install and uninstall things directly. So it's a lot nicer than it was before. But there are a lot of things that are hidden. If there are some tools that you used to have in that you're not finding, you might have to go to the advanced tab and say, add those tools manually. So we have packages of tools that are on the front page and individual tools on the second page. Redgate, not going to show right now, and I won't show Visual Studio Team Services, but there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. I'm just looking at the time. So I want to get to the stuff that's beyond that. So today we had our Data AMP conference. This is one slide on this. This is not a discussion about SQL Server, but as of today, it's official. The next version of SQL Server is going to be called SQL Server 2017. So it's no longer vNext, which probably gives you some hints as to when it might come out within the next 5 years. CCP2 is released, and this will run on Docker on Linux, it will run on Linux, it will run on Windows. A lot of stuff out there. Some cognitive services have gone from preview to production. We'll talk about more on cognitive servers in a second. R Server 9.1, and various other analysis type services that were announced today. I'm sure they recorded that, so you should be able to find that on Channel 9 tomorrow. Some people in the room were actually looking at it this morning as it was going. So the last topic I want to talk about is bots and cognitive services. How many people have written a bot? Oh, good. You're kind of good. Good. That's good. So bots are not exactly new, but they're getting a lot of traction really fast. My theory is that Microsoft released Teams, and the people talking about Teams, which were a lot of business users, said this is really cool, and they heard the term bots as a side effect of that discussion, and now bots are really cool. It's a theory. In any case, from a developer perspective, bots are a language communication channel for you over things like Teams or Skype or over a web browser or email or various other things. And it's the processing engine behind that. So instead of bringing up a form and saying fill in this information, you can have a conversation with a bot to fill in that information, or to manage a workflow, or to help you find stuff or do stuff. Sometimes that interactive discussion is easier than working with a computer. Now, I'm sure you've been online with a computer before and talked to the computer and typed stuff to the computer and knew it was a computer and was sick of it. Obviously, we start there, but there's a lot of ways we can get better. The bot itself, though, is just the communications channel that allows you to write one set of code and deploy it to a bunch of different places. And when I say a bunch of different places, Skype, Teams, web chat, email, Facebook Messenger, GroupMe, et cetera, et cetera. And there's also a direct line that allows you to expand out to other stuff as well. I just described a way you might use it in terms of talking with it as an individual. There are thought processes out there. This can become a standard interface mechanism even between systems. So it's not only can a human being use something that looks like a natural language to talk to a computer and solve problems, but could two computers actually use something that looks like natural language to talk to each other? You might say, yeah, why would I want to do that? Well, frankly, that's a more loosely coupled interface than if you have a, my interface and give very specific parameters in very specific places. So there can be some more interpretation in there, and I can have a less exact match in the code I'm writing. Bots might be things you use very much for a one-to-one, where a bot is talking to you, you're talking to the bot to solve a problem, to perform a workflow, to do whatever it needs to do. It can also be from a team perspective, like you'd have in Teams, where I might have a bot in a team room, and that team might facilitate some process that the team overall is working on. So a lot of automation things you can start doing as you wrap your head around this. So whether you want to order a pizza or do a business workflow, bots are actually a pretty interesting way to look at the world. The way Microsoft has the bot framework, it works great for Node, it works great for JavaScript, not Node or C#, no surprise. But it is hosted as web services, just REST endpoints. And it works very well, no surprise, in Azure web apps. We also have a bot service that's in preview, which allows you to go directly to the Azure portal and say, give me a bot, and it will spin up a bot for you with the C# script behind the scenes that allow you to tweak it however you want. And it's almost a 2 clicks to have your bot up and running. It's hosting it for you in Azure Functions in that case, and you're ready to run.
And we should mention that anybody who has an MSDN license has free time on Azure, so you can play around with the bots on Azure for free if you have an MSDN license, which I think everyone here does.
Yep, in addition to the MSDN license, which gives you $50, $100, or $150 of free credit every month to play with, a lot of these services start at the free level. So once you have a subscription, even if there's nothing on it, no dollars on it, things like bots, you can spin up a bot, and as long as you don't overly massively use it, it's probably free. Same with web apps and things like that. There are free tiers. So now the bot is the communication channel, but what becomes useful is when it can actually understand what you're talking about. So I'm going to introduce Lewis. Lewis is a language understanding cognitive service. So it's a service, a high-order service based on machine learning that lives in Azure that allows you to fairly easily, or makes it easy for you, to have some interpretation of what a human being might mean when they say something. So if you type a sentence that says, how do I do this, whatever that means, and somebody else says, I want to do this, you would just gracefully interpret between the two. Computers don't do that. Lewis helps. All right? Lewis is a trainable system where you watch for patterns in language and make it so that it can interpret what a human being is saying. That's one of many different cognitive services we have. I said there were a few cognitive services that were just general availability announced today, so they're fully supported. Most of these are still in preview. Lewis is still in preview. But if you look at this, there are some interesting things in the cognitive services space. Text analytics, search. Big search is actually one of the biggest ones out there that we use. Translations. Some, if you look at it from a face perspective, you've probably seen these in the various things where you have a picture and it has a bunch of faces. It'll draw the boxes around the faces because it can identify what a face looks like. Something the human mind is very good at and takes a little bit of work for a computer to do, but the service makes it a lot easier. Emotion API is the person in that picture that you just identified, happy, sad, angry, whatever else. It can be very interesting information. So if you start putting all these pieces together, you're starting to get the things that make humans unique and giving it to a computer so it's not as unique anymore, and you can have a computer actually interact in a much different way. And much more understanding of what the human state is. So, 10 minutes, real quick demo on, I'm an editor config. I already decided Visual Studio didn't like me. bots and such. So I'm going to try to, I don't know if I'll show you any code or not. We'll see where this goes. So first of all, bots. Dev.botframework.com. You can do a lot of the launch stuff right from the website. Once you've logged in, create bots. Now this is actually going to manage from a registration perspective. If you want to have this endpoint, this is a catalog that Microsoft keeps on everyone's behalf. So if you want to go to a Skype client, let's say, and talk to a bot, you go to this registry so you can figure out how to connect to it. And that connection will go to your code. Okay? And it's a fairly simple thing to fill out. You will create an ID and password to tell you how to get there. And once you have that, you'll have bots out there that basically wire up to an endpoint. I have two bots. The second one, which I don't think I'll show, is actually a Hello World bot service. So I went to the Azure portal and said, give me a bot, and it created some C# script and put it out there, and I have a bot that will do basic counting of what I'm typing into the text window. Not any language understanding, just basic stuff. This one up here is the one I use most frequently. I have it wired up so it actually points to an endpoint, has the correct credentials and stuff, so that, in my case, hosted in Azure, going through these channels, so you can get to it through Teams, through Skype, or through web chat. I haven't wired up any of the other ones. You know, you can't go through SMS right now. You can't go through Kik. And if you want to chat on it, I actually have it wired up so I can say, let me see, the bot I have in there is actually based on, it's actually doing very minimal stuff based on trying to do some understanding of if you're trying to place orders and stuff. So I say, do you have any ABC 1, 2, 3 in stock? Now the answer should be yes or no, and I go to some API on the back end. What I'm actually getting out though is something that's showing me Lewis in action. So Lewis is saying, based on that question, it looks like you're asking for real-time stock information. What's on stock right now? So I would, of course, have other stuff in there to do the processing, but I've wired up Lewis, and you can take a look at that if you want. And if it doesn't know what you're doing, it'll come back with a none intent, because it couldn't match it to anything that I had in Lewis as a rule. This bot itself is probably about 300 lines of code. But in terms of what I actually wrote myself, it's probably about 10 lines of code. You know, file new project, it works well. So that's the bot side of stuff. Any questions there? Makes perfect sense. The Lewis side of stuff, Lewis.ai, and I apparently am signed out, so I'll sign in again.
There is a bot class in the Microsoft Virtual Academy.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bots that do some really cool stuff that are already pre-created out there. If you go to the bot, you go to Skype and say I want to add, not Skype for business, Skype and say I want to add a bot. It'll give you a catalog of the bots out there. Look for Murphy bot. You use Murphy?
Yeah.
It's just a fun one. You ask it, what if dogs could fly? And it will go out to the internet and find a picture of a dog and find a picture of a pilot and merge them together and say this is what it would look like if dogs could fly. A pilot with a dog's face. But again, stretching the boundaries, it's doing some interpretation of what your language is, what it's doing, and it's doing some back-end processing to give you something maybe useful. So I told you I was using a stock model under Lewis. Here's what that application of that model looks like. And again, you can create your own and import your own. Lewis has a series of intents. What are the things you're trying to do? These are all the things I would programmatically say I want to do. You know, actually, this is a different one. This is stock market. One thing. This is how I went into it. You know, it's a stock market up or down, you know, and it has various intents and utterances that you actually use to get those intents. So various things you might say that would cause Lewis to recognize it as meaning that's what you're trying to do, that intent. And you can add your own in there, and that's, of course, things you put your code on the back end for. So here are the ones that it's actually trained through and figured out. And it's not just that, like I say, it does do machine learning on the back end to try to interpret if it can't. But based on what it finds in here, it will score it and say, there's an 80% likelihood that what you meant was this intent. And the developer can say, is 80% good enough, or do I have to ask more questions? Right. So a lot of things you can do there.
What if you give it a bunch of questions that it doesn't interpret?
It depends, what does your code do?
Well, if people are, like my bot or whatever, if they keep asking questions that I'm not anticipating.
Yep. So the question for those in the Skype meeting, what if it's asking questions I don't know? Well, hopefully, as a developer delivering a service, in this case a bot to somebody, you're monitoring that and using that to improve your training model, the stuff in here that you actually tell what the new intents are and different ways to recognize that, and providing that feedback. So one of the customers I'm working with in Phoenix is actually looking at a feedback loop that will actually go through and where it can't figure things out, it tries to get a human involved. Because for them, they're a customer-facing thing. You don't want to upset your customers. But beyond that, use that as feedback back into the model. So they actually have a feedback loop where it'll retrain the model based on things that are understood there. And also a little bit of sentiment analysis so that if the bot's talking to somebody and somebody starts sounding like they're not happy about what they're talking about, like, why don't you understand what I'm saying? That might be a keyword to the bot to say, quick, escalate to a human. Right?
Is it doing a fuzzy match on keywords, or can you have it do that, or does it have to match the whole thing?
Oh, no, it's not matching the whole thing. It's using machine learning to do like a fuzzy match, absolutely. So it doesn't always get it right, but as you train it, you actually go through and retrain the model, it will improve its accuracy.
So you could say market, up, down, those are keywords that I care about.
Yep.
And then the add whatever.
Yep.
String along words.
So the market doing well. And so down here it's going to say, interpret it as the market up and down. I don't think I have a statement there, is the market doing well? But it got enough, like you said, fuzzy. It said, this is what I think you mean. And it said that through the other options. Actually, it gave me 100 on that one, a score of 100%. So, actually, I probably have that exact question in there. Otherwise, it said I'm 95% likely that this is what it is.
When you set it up, are you setting it up based on keywords, or are you setting it up based on?
You're training based on intents and entities. So there's the intents. You define what that is. And the entities are the objects that go in that. So in this case, it's a ticker. It's only going to have ticker symbols.
Okay, then use an internal object.
Yes. Like I said, we have a model in the back end. That's the value we're adding. We're giving you the model that makes it easier to keep this. You don't have to train that or do your own fuzzy matching. You do have to train it. But you don't have to write your own code to figure out how to do that. So that's kind of the value add there. I want to go on real quick, not to cognitive services there, but to a level higher abstraction that you could actually get up and running today in a matter of minutes. In some ways, this is very production ready and very useful, and like I said, you could have it up and running in minutes. In some ways, not as much. And this is Q&A Maker. It's based on top of Lewis, which is based on top of the bot framework. In this case, you create services, register them. It'll create these endpoints that allow you to actually ask questions. So here, for example, I have and if I'm looking at this, this would show the REST endpoint to call if I wanted to make use of this service, to ask a question and get a response back. But I want to show you what this actually looks like. So Q&A Maker, if I log in the first time, I'm not going to do this for you right now, I can go out there and say, I want to create a new Q&A. Point it at your website that has a fact up there, frequently asked questions. It'll import the questions and answers, and it will use that. So now I can create a bot in a matter of seconds, minutes, that knows your frequently asked questions. You can go to the channel and say, hey, how do I do such and such? And if it's in your fact, it'll give you the answer. And so, for example, here is something I imported from one of your facts, the media library fact. And if I go in there and start testing on this, it's the same type of training and fuzzy logic. I can ask a question. How do I use the media library? Now, this is what the answer it gave me is, but on the left-hand side is saying, here's all the things that might have been matches. And I can go through and click on, oh, it's really not this one, it's that one instead. Whatever that is, I save it, and that becomes part of the model going forward, so it'll be better able to interpret as other people ask that question. And if that wasn't right, you go over here and add an alternative, and you have an additional one. I will say from a real production use perspective, this is in preview. That's not the problem. The problem is the management of this is very much from a website assigned to a user. It's not an organizational thing at this point. That will change over time. We have some tools on GitHub that allow you to manage that in a slightly more flexible way. But again, if you have
A case where
a case where you need to send an email, get a response back that's pointing to a link somewhere, or things like that, you can have that up running in a couple minutes. So hopefully that's interesting. It shows you some of the stuff that we're doing. And based on the time, which is basically out, I am going to go and say basically I'm done. Hopefully you got a few good things out of there. I know some of my demos became exceedingly slow, so I apologize for that. But if there are questions, either now to share with everyone or questions you want to have afterwards, I'm glad to stick around. So anything interesting? Good? Bad? Mediocre? Yeah? Good? Okay. Thank you.